Okay, so if you have the best of possible worlds, you still need some sort of normative claim saying that we should move towards the best of all possible worlds.
No, I don't actually make the normative claim we should move towards the best of all possible worlds. It's just a descriptive claim saying this is the best of all possible worlds.
Yeah, but if you're trying to create a moral system out of that, you're not creating a moral system. There's zero moral. You're saying you're creating a moral system with no normative claims at all.
Right, I'm getting rid of the oughts. These are just descriptive claims. I'm saying that morality is a description of the best of all possible worlds and a description of whether or not we're moving way towards it or away from it. So I'm
morality is a description of the best of all possible worlds?
Correct.
Okay, I mean that's not how you defined it in your video when you were talking about this. I mean, you're
right.
Like,
the introduction to morality. Morality is how we determine what is right and wrong. And
can you give us the definition that you started with, Drew?
Yeah, morality is the principles or criteria used to judge what is right or wrong. You're talking about normativity here. You're not talking about descriptions of the universe.
Correct. And then when I go deeper into it, I explain the way we determine what is right or wrong is we make a comparison to the best of all possible worlds.
But you're making no normative claims as we shouldn't move towards that necessarily?
Correct. It's just a descriptive claim. It's saying what is right and what is wrong is a descriptive claim of what is.
So why are you using the term morality here then? You're not actually, it's not a morality. You're just talking about descriptions of the universe.
Morality is not defined concretely. There is no solution to objective morality yet. There isn't an agreed upon solution. It's not a solved problem.
There may not be an objective solution to it.
But that means that it's open-ended what we can define as it or not. There are certain kinds of things which Dan Dennett calls strange inversions of reasoning, where we take what seems to be the case and we change it in some really drastic way to get to a better answer, like what quantum mechanics did and what Einstein did with general relativity and saying space-time can bend, and what Darwin did by saying complex things can come from simple things. So what I'm doing is counterintuitive. I agree with that. I am detaching the normative we oughts from morality and just making a descriptive claim, and that's my solution to the is-ought problem. So it's my.
That's not a solution to the is-ought.
It is actually a solution to the problem.
It's not, because if you the is-ought,
I'm more qualified to you on this.
I agree. No, look, the is-ought distinction is a problem because you're not solving the is-ought problem by just talking about the ises. That's not a solution. That's just saying I'm only going to talk about half this conversation.
Right. So it's, if you want to be punched in the face, it's moral to punch you in the face. If you don't want to be
but that's desires again. So we are talking about desires.
It's the will. The will. It's not, the desires can be a part of will. It may not be necessarily the only thing. So if I restrict your freedoms and I tie you up so you can't choose, regardless of what your will is, unless that is your will, that would be immoral. So I'm restricted your will so that you can't choose. That would be immoral unless you wanted it.
So if doing an action which limits my choices is immoral?
Yes, unless you specifically asked for that.
So, I mean, on the one sense, right, like, I turn 40, say, right, my 40th birthday, I wake up and I find that I'm now no longer 39 anymore. In some sense, my freedom has been limited by that, right? I'm not free to be 30 anymore. Right? I'm not free to be in my 30s anymore. I now have to be in my 40s. Is that immoral? What just happened? Me becoming 40, is that immoral?
Well, I would consider like the physical consequences immoral, but not necessarily the abstract idea.
I mean, I guess I'm saying, do you think time passing itself is immoral? Is that because it does limit my choices, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, I'd say it'd be morally superior if we could turn back the clock voluntarily if you wanted to. That would be a morally superior option, so yes.
Okay, so just the passage of time is immoral on your theory?
Yes, if it's involuntary. It's exactly like the rock falling on you without your consent. It's immoral.
Right, so...
Could you actually describe to me how you could determine something is right or wrong within your definition of morality?
The same way all moral systems do, with moral intuition and moral progress as a guide.
Can you give me a single example?
Our society today is more moral than societies in the past because we allow acceptance of LGBT community when we didn't before. We don't burn witches. We don't put people in slavery because of the color of their skin. That's
why are those things bad though?
Because of moral intuition and moral progress. That's how we define
so morality. You're saying just wait, so okay,
that's our experience of morality. It's like we experience...
So you're just talking okay, so you're talking about our intuitions informing morality.
Yes, that's how epistemically we get to an understanding of morality.
Okay, so you're okay with Ted Bundy's intuitions being moral?
No, Ted, but we all humans, the way morality is justified by theists and atheists in ethics is we use moral intuition, moral progress as how we discover morality. It's kind of like gravity. We see gravity because things fall, and we say, well, this is something, and we're going to have to describe this something. So moral intuition, moral progress is how everyone in ethics uses as the grounds to say there is such a thing as morality.
Wait, okay, so moral progress. Could you? I'm sorry. There's a lot of could you please describe me moral progress in a world where we're just describing things?
Moral progress is something in this world that we have now. It's
Okay.
true of just something we observe, like gravity. Gravity falls. It's independent of my theory of the best of all possible worlds. Moral progress in philosophy is the description that we see the modern societies as having progressed morally and become morally superior to past societies. For example, by being more accepting of the LGBT community, not imprisoning people by the color of their skin.
By what metric? By what metric are you saying that we're better than we were before?
You would have to ask the philosophers and just Google Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy moral progress, because that's the philosophy. That's not me. That's not my definition.
Okay, so what you're telling me is that we've made progress, okay, compared to the way we used to be?
That's the definition in philosophy of moral progress, yes.
But why is it progression? Why is slavery?
Go ask the philosophers.
Okay, so I'm asking you a question about your position, and you're telling me to go talk to someone.
This is not my position. This is a definition of philosophy. You have to ask the philosophers that one. This has nothing to do with my position. This is just the grounds.
Basically, okay, this is a very simple question. Why is what used to be worse than today? Because for there to be progress, there has to be some discrepancy between
this is something in philosophy. This is not my position. This is the modern standardized definition of moral progress comes from the field of philosophy.
I'm not claiming it's your. I'm not.
The philosopher's basis is Google it on the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy.
Okay, look, I'm trying to figure out what your I don't care if it's your position. I'm trying to figure out how there's a comparison being made here. Is this something related to your view about the best possible worlds?
No. This is the foundation of all of ethics in every field of philosophy is the moral intuition and moral progress. It is everything in ethics. It's the basis for the theist model of morality. It's basis for the atheist model of morality.
What prompted you to talk about someone's views other than yourself when I asked you that question? Why are you bringing up somebody else?
What is my basis of? You asked how do I justify something about my basis on how we determine one thing is right or wrong, and I said I use moral intuition and moral progress, which is the same thing that every model of morality uses.
Okay, so it is your position.
Right, it's the basis of every model of morality. But
okay, if it's your position,
I didn't make this up.
It doesn't matter if you made it. If it's your position, explain it. I'm trying to understand what your position is, and you won't explain it. You're telling me to go Google somebody.
Right, because I don't need to explain this. This is philosophy. This is the basis of every field of ethics. If you reject this, you reject ethics.
Okay, give me a justification for saying that now is worse or better.
I don't need to. This is the basis of.
You just said it's about justification.
All of ethics. This is. I don't want to go into a detailed discussion of other philosophers' work. This has been.
You just said it's your position. You just said it's your position.
On the basis of their work, yes. If you want to know what their work is, go look at their work. This is not contingent on my position specifically. This is contingent on all of ethics. If you want to know something about the entire field of ethics, go research ethics.
Don't philosophers disagree on ethics? Different philosophers have different ethical frameworks.
Yes.
On these positions, no, not a single. Other than the people who reject.
What do you mean? Like Bentham and Hume have completely different moral philosophies.
Like every model of morality in ethics, every ethicist bases ethics on moral intuition and moral progress. That's it. Those are the two options. Those are what you got. Every single one of them. So going back to my point. Most physicists, the way science progresses in today's society is by convincing the consensus in the scientific field, not just a guy published a paper. That does not make it credible. You have to convince the consensus.
The consensus can be wrong, though. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, it can, but it's less likely to be wrong than a guy published a paper and said.
Okay, well, I didn't. I cited several papers.
Great, that's still less than the consensus. So mine is still more supported than yours is.
I don't really care how many votes we can take. I care about evidence, and that's what I like to focus on is the actual evidence. And
I tend to take the position that the majority has a better understanding of the evidence than you do, or those few guys that publish the paper do.
Okay, well, at the end of the day, I'm going to go on the evidence. I'm not going to be told what to think by a majority rule.
Right. I am too, and I'm going to go with the majority who understands it better than you do.
fine, you can claim that all you want, but if you can't actually present evidence or a better explanation, I can say I'm justified in saying I have the best explanation.
So I ground morality not in theism, but in pantheism, just an eternal, all-powerful nature as an undiscovered law of nature. And I agree that there is an objective morality, and that objective morality indicates the theistic God is clearly immoral.
Okay, so what determines something to be the best?
I agree with the theist argument that we have our moral intuitions and moral progress as indicative of an objective morality. So I agree there is an objective morality. I agree our moral intuitions and our moral progress indicate that objective morality. And the objective morality indicated by those things is that the most moral world is one where no being can it's physically impossible to force one being to do something they don't voluntarily agree to do.
This is would be to ask Tom if intuitions make something like morals empirically true. I think Genus Trax is
absolutely not. No, not even a little bit. I'm just granting the theist argument for the sake of argument. It does not. Moral intuition and moral progress is just something in our head. It's just conceptual. There's no reason to believe it is actually an objective thing in the world from that line of argumentation. I just granted that in this debate for the sake of argument.
Gotcha.
I'm not talking about top-down in the way you are. I'm saying metaphysical absolutes. You can't start with metaphysical absolutes.
Well, who said we're doing that? I started with the evidence and build arguments from there.
Right. I'm saying any type of metaphysical absolute, if you add it to a theory ever, it's immediately unsupported. So if you think your God is all-powerful, you're immediately wrong. Or you're immediately unsupported. That's fine. My introduction is in general against all cases of theism. So if you believe in a God that's all-powerful, all-knowing, all-loving, personal, eternal, conscious, or any of those infinites, you're immediately unsupported. That wasn't a rebuttal. That was
we present other arguments to back that up. We don't just argue from just asserted ad hoc. But I mean, the three arguments I'm focusing on are compatible with deism, theism, anything right now. I'm just arguing for basic theism. As I said, I'm a classical apologist. If I can't get you to see theism, I'm not going to go any further.
Right. So again, my point is that no form of human knowledge can ever justify those kinds of absolute properties. They're completely ad hoc.
Can you define what you mean by justify?
Support, make it reasonable to believe with evidence or argument in some sense.
Why can't I make arguments that are reasonable belief based on the data?
Because no form of human knowledge can justify metaphysical absolutes. That was kind of the point of the...
Everything you just said cannot be justified because it's a metaphysical absolute.
I never said any metaphysical absolute. What are you talking about?
You just made an absolute claim.
No, I didn't. I said no form of human knowledge, the limited kind that we currently have, which is not a metaphysical absolute.
That
it's the tentative knowledge that we have. No. Because there could be other knowledge out there that could justify it that we just don't know about yet. So it's only a claim about human knowledge, not a claim about all knowledge.
It's possible, but I don't care about what's possible. As you said in your previous talks, an equal number of things are possible. I care about what's the most probable explanation. That's why I argued for the most probable explanation tonight. Just because there are other possible explanations, or just because we took a vote and not everyone agrees, that doesn't mean my arguments are wrong. Just like it didn't mean Galileo was wrong. It would have been absurd if the opponents of Galileo, it was the Dominicans, the Dominicans, if they would have said, no, we're right because we got the consensus. I mean, actually, they didn't even argue that way.
Okay, so again, my argument was that there is no evidence. There's no more probable explanation. They're all equally probable because all of the arguments are false. They indicate the absolutes with zero precision. They indicate them with nothing, like the square root of a pork chop. That your argument is effectively the square root of a pork chop, therefore God.
Why?
It's completely not.
Because
no form of human knowledge. Because no form of human knowledge can justify metaphysical absolutes. So to go back to my example, all evidence of the natural world is not evidence. There is no supernatural. Would you agree with that?
No form of knowledge can justify metaphysical absolutes, is what you're saying.
Yes.
That
is demonstrated by all. No, it's not. It's an argument about human knowledge. The limited amount of human knowledge is not a claim about all knowledge.
You're still making that claim that your human knowledge, my human knowledge, cannot justify metaphysical absolutes. Therefore, you cannot make that absolute claim.
Nope, that's an epistemic claim.
Well, I reject it then. I don't agree with it then. If it's just an epistemic claim, that's just how you're determined knowledge. But that's not going to address
which is justified by all of the problems in philosophy and science which prove it to be the case, that no known form of knowledge can indicate metaphysical properties, like the problem of undetermination and induction, and the problem of the criterion, and the problem of universals, and Agrippa's trilemma, and the problem of easy knowledge. None of those arguments, those all fail. All of your arguments fail for the reason of
the most likely or best explanation in metaphysics.
Well, it means any argument that tries to indicate the metaphysical is just false. It does not do it. It cannot do it. It is the square root of a pork chop. Just false.
What is your evidence that it actually is metaphysically false? That's a metaphysical claim. You're making metaphysical claims saying that they're metaphysically false.
No.
Yeah.
I'm saying it cannot support or justify the metaphysical claim. I'm not saying it is metaphysically false. I'm saying the evidence does not justify a metaphysical claim.
Is a metaphysical claim?
No, it's not.
It's
It's an epistemic claim.
No, you're making claims about metaphysics. You're saying we can't do X in metaphysics. And I'm saying, well, okay, that's a metaphysical claim.
No, I'm saying we can't do X in our current limited epistemic knowledge. We could possibly do X if we had metaphysical knowledge. We do not have metaphysical knowledge. We have epistemic, limited
How do you know we don't have metaphysical knowledge? That's a metaphysical claim.
I don't. I can't prove that we don't. But
Then
you'd
you
have to
can't
actually
claim that.
justify that claim. I can show that no form of human knowledge can justify that claim.
If you think we can't have metaphysical knowledge, you cannot tell me I cannot have metaphysical knowledge. That's a claim about metaphysics.
No, it's a burden of proof fallacy. You hold the burden of proof to justify your metaphysical claim. I can show that no form of human evidence can justify it.
Okay, you're seem to be confusing justification and absolute proof. I'm arguing for the best explanation. I'm not arguing.
I'm saying there is no best explanation. There is absolutely nothing that indicates those conclusions. 0% indication. There isn't the best explanation. They're all just unsupported completely and totally in every respect.
Again, you're making these absolute claims, and I don't see any evidence to accept these absolute claims.
Again, those are all the problems, the biggest problems in philosophy and sciences, which is why science doesn't make those kinds of claims.
Yeah, and
the same
when
problems
we
apply to science also apply to theology. The same reason science can't support metaphysical naturalism, theology can't support metaphysical supernaturalism or God.
Okay, well, yeah, when epistemics make that, I just invoke particularism. If you're going to make these absolute claims, you actually need to show that I should accept them. I mean, there's no reason for me to accept those absolute claims if you can't show you can justify those claims by your own standard. It's pulling the rug right from under you.
Unless you reject all of the commonly well understood and accepted problems in every field of knowledge, then that's a justification of why you should accept my conclusion.
No, the problems in knowledge are just basically we can never absolutely prove something 100%. Doesn't mean we can't reason to something. I mean, this would be absurd if we applied this in elsewhere.
The problem isn't absolute certainty. The problem is metaphysical absolute property. So I'm grant that you're totally fine in not saying you have absolute certainty there's a God. The problem is that you are applying absolute properties to a God. The absolute properties are what are necessarily unsupported.
What absolute properties are you referring to?
All powerful, all knowing, all good, necessary divine aseity.
Where did I say that in any of my presentation?
You didn't. My first statement was an introduction. It was not a rebuttal. I was not rebutting your introduction. It was my introduction.
Well, that's why I'm asking you now because we're in the discussion part.
Right. So that was my introduction.
Oh,
that's my position. It has nothing to do with your position at all.
Okay, but this is not really addressing my arguments. You're just trying to make these absolute philosophical claims, which I reject, because again, sure, there are problems in knowledge. We can never absolutely prove something other than the fact that I exist and I'm experiencing something, but that doesn't mean we can at least reason to the best explanation. I mean, if what you're saying is true, I mean, we have to throw out dozens of scientific theories we can never absolutely prove because science doesn't deal in proof. Science doesn't even really deal in falsification anymore. If you read someone like Emery Lakatos or Paul Feyerabender, they're wonderful book called For and Against Method.
Again, you're confusing epistemology and ontology. I'm not saying the problem is absolute certainty. I grant we don't have absolute certainty. I'm totally okay with that. The problem is when you add absolute properties to a theory. All powerful, all knowing, all loving. If you add those to a theory, then you require absolute certainty or they're unjustified, essentially.
No, you don't. Because you're just making an inference of the best explanation.
Because those can never be the best explanation. Those can never be the best explanation. Remember, go back to my analogy. All of the evidence of the natural world is not evidence. There is no supernatural. Why? Why is that the case?
All of the evidence, say that again?
All of the evidence of the natural world, given all of the evidence of the natural world, that does not indicate there is no supernatural. Why?
Does not indicate there is no supernatural? So all of the evidence does not indicate naturalism is true, is what you're saying?
Correct. Metaphysical naturalism.
Okay. Actual naturalists will argue from evidence in the natural world. They'll make inferences to naturalism. Sure, they understand they can't prove it. They understand they cannot prove there is no supernatural when you're a philosophical naturalist, but they still at least argue. And then the theist makes arguments, and then the naturalist makes counter arguments. We make objections. We're just arguing to the best explanation. We're not arguing for absolute certainty or that we can absolutely know or anything like that. I mean, anyone who tries to Kant, like noumenal phenomenal distinction, says there's this absolute distinction, is making an absolute claim about the nominal, and that's you can't.
You didn't answer my question. You didn't answer my question. Why is all of the evidence of the natural world not demonstrative that there is no supernatural?
Okay, I was explaining.
Even the metaphysical naturalists don't agree that. They all agree that there could be a supernatural out there that we haven't discovered yet. Every single one of them.
Yeah, and I agree there could not be. But again, you're trying to say this sort of demonstrates, like, why does the natural world not demonstrate naturalism is true? Because metaphysics, science, does not deal in absolutes. It's not deal in absolute proof. We argue for the best explanation. When a philosophical naturalist argues for naturalism, they don't argue that they absolutely can prove this. No one claims that.
Right. So if you said there is a God, if we had equal evidence for a God, that would not show there wasn't a greater God somewhere down the line that we haven't discovered yet, correct?
Yeah, it's possible. Doesn't mean it's probable.
Which means if you made this statement that there is the God who was uncreated and there is by definition no other God, you hold the burden of proof to try and demonstrate that, correct?
I hold the burden to show evidence, yeah.
And just like the fact that there is no evidence, all of the evidence of the natural world doesn't prove there is no supernatural, doesn't even indicate there is no supernatural, the same thing applies to God. So all of these metaphysical claims are unsupported. That one's due to the problem of induction and the problem of underdetermination.
Yeah, but you mentioned the problem of induction. That does not mean we can't do induction just because there is a problem of induction. That sort of supports my point. Just because we have a problem of induction, that does not mean we still cannot make inductive arguments.
Correct. But again, you're confusing epistemology and ontology. You can't make metaphysical properties absolutes and justify those. You can't ever do it. It's not possible.
I'm not saying
that's why science never does.
I'm not saying they're absolute.
That's why theology is wrong.
Why?
You can never support absolute properties like all-powerful, all-knowing, all-loving. All of those are out.
Is it absolutely true theology is wrong?
No, it's absolutely true that all human knowledge can't justify those things.
Is that absolutely true?
No, that's not absolutely true. It's true based on human knowledge, the current known human knowledge.
So you're making an inference of the best explanation.
I'm making a deductive explanation of all human knowledge, which is limited.
That's exactly what I presented deductive arguments.
And none of your deductive arguments work. They all fail, and I can prove they fail by saying, oh, look, they fall into this problem, which eradicates that explanation. So that doesn't indicate anything. Because of the big problems, they prove they do not indicate your conclusion. The reason scientists don't ever make these claims is because they provably false. They do not indicate anything.
Scientists don't make these claims?
No, scientists do not add metaphysical properties to things like that.
Yes, we have to, by definition. Metaphysics has to be involved in science. That's just the basis of understanding basic philosophy of science.
No, it doesn't. Instrumentalism is one example. That's just false. No, you don't. Phenomenalism is another example. You don't need to do that.
Have you read For and Against?
AJA rejected metaphysics completely. No, you don't.
What is the basic tenets of? What are the basic parts of science?
What are the basic parts of science?
3 parts.
I would just go with some way to differentiate between our imagination and our experience. We need some methodology to demonstrate that.
If you look at philosophy of science, the basic 3 parts would be shaping principles, datas, and theories. We always start with shaping principles. That's why when we look at the moon, we don't think like Aristotle did that it was an intelligent being. We all have these metaphysical prejudices. That's how we look at data. From the data, we build theories, and then theories reshape our shaping principles. Theories are conceptual, data is empirical, shaping principles are metaphysical, and they're always working in conjunction with other. This is something Emery Lakatos points out when he's responding to people like Paul Feyerabend that are anti-realists and say something that the crazy stuff that like science is art, and or Thomas Kuhn, who sort of flirts with that idea at some points. But the idea that we don't have these metaphysical prejudices in science is just not backed by philosophy of science.
Yeah, it is. It actually is. You're just wrong about that. So again, all science agrees on this. You can't ever add those metaphysical properties or your conclusion is immediately unsupported. It's why science doesn't do it. It's why theology is wrong and why everyone rejects it in science for the most part.
You keep making
you can't add those metaphysical
claims that theology is wrong, and then you keep saying I can't make absolute claims. It's confused.
Right, because I'm not making an absolute claim about all knowledge in the universe. You are. I'm making an epistemic claim about the limited amount of human knowledge. That can be justified. Your claim about all possible knowledge, that can't be justified.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying this is the best explanation. I'm not saying that I'm making claims about absolute all knowledge.
You can't ever claim an absolute metaphysical property is the best explanation. Not supportable.
That is an absolute, though. I mean, you can't.
Nope, that's a claim about human knowledge. That is an epistemic claim about human knowledge, which can be justified. Your claim cannot be justified. Can be justified.
It's an absolute metaphysical claim about what humans can do with their knowledge. That is an absolute metaphysical claim about what we can do with epistemology. It's not an epistemic claim. It's a metaphysical claim about it.
You're equivocating between 2 different kinds of metaphysics. Just ignore that. It doesn't even apply to my argument. It doesn't refute anything I've said. So again, we can justify claims about human knowledge because we have access to human knowledge. We cannot justify claims about metaphysical knowledge. We don't have access to metaphysical knowledge, except for things like I think, therefore I am.
What metaphysical...
Arguing this is a metaphysical thing is irrelevant to the argument.
We don't have access to metaphysical evidence is what you're saying.
Correct.
That's why I gave empirical evidence. I relied on data that was presented in peer-reviewed papers, and I argued for the best explanation from that.
No form of empirical evidence qualifies as metaphysical evidence.
Okay,
category here.
That's a metaphysical claim.
No, that's an empirical claim.
That is a metaphysical claim for sure, because you can't empirically study that. You can't empirically find that. That's it. That is a shaping principle you have. You're forcing your shaping principles and trying to say that.
It would only be a metaphysical claim if I claimed we would never be able to. We could potentially in the future be able to, so it's not a metaphysical claim.
You said we absolutely cannot.
With the current limited knowledge we have, it would only be a metaphysical claim if I said we could never do this.
Okay, but you said earlier absolutely that we cannot have access to this. That is an absolute claim.
Only with our current human knowledge. It is not an absolute claim. It would only be an absolute claim if I said it will never be possible.
Okay, but the problem is that is such an absolute claim, and there's no reason to. There's no empirical evidence to accept.
Again, your claim applies to all knowledge. There is a being who was not created. My claim only applies to human knowledge. This should be an obvious difference, extremely obvious. My claim only applies to human knowledge. Your claim applies to all the universe's knowledge. Your claim is unsupported. Mine is not unsupported.
I'm making metaphysical claims. I accept that. I'm arguing from the evidence to the best explanation. You're making metaphysical claims about humans are capable with our current knowledge.
No, you're equivocating language. I'm just going to say you're wrong. Stop.
I mean, my claim all you want, but...
My claim only applies to human knowledge. Your claim applies to all knowledge. Yours is unsupported. Mine is not unsupported. This is purely obvious. So, and we can show this by saying, just picking a different definition of maximal greatness. Like there's the Douglas Gaskin made the argument that, well, maybe the greatest of all possible being is one that can create something with the least amount of power. Therefore, the greatest being is one that can create the universe without existing. Therefore, God does not exist. Now, of course, this isn't actually an argument that there is an existing God that doesn't exist. It's just pointing out a reductio ad absurdum, that if you want to accept these definitions or these quantifiers...
The argument itself is a reductio ad absurdum because it's a contradiction.
Well, the contradiction is irrelevant to the argument. The argument is just about the definitions. You can pick a definition of maximal greatness, which is different from the definition that you're using, to get a reductio to some absurdity.
So you're separating these terms, and they're not separate. There's not maximal and greatness. It's one term, maximal greatness.
Okay, so, I'm happy to grant that.
Oh, okay. So you don't think that our intuitions can guide us here at all?
Absolutely not. I tend to go with something like Plantinga's natural argument against evolution, or evolutionary argument against naturalism, and say that our intuitions are only a description of what is survivability and what has helped us survive. It tells us nothing about truth at all. We cannot use intuitions to guide us towards truth. It's just a survivable metric. And I look to history and say that people use our intuitions to think that lightning was created by Zeus. People use our intuitions to think that fairy circles were created by fairies. We use our intuition to think that objects are solid. 99% of objects is empty space. Our intuitions are not in any sense indicative of truth at all. They're just indicative of survivability.
So you think that the evolutionary argument against naturalism is successful?
In some cases, yes. I think that the way Plantinga uses it, he confuses methodological and metaphysical naturalism. But I think if you use it against the metaphysical naturalism, yes, it's successful.
Yeah. Okay. So you're not a metaphysical naturalist.
No, I'm not. Because again, my position is the Kant's noumenal phenomenal distinction. We can't know anything about the noumenal, and the noumenal is the metaphysics. So we're just completely isolated from that completely. We can say nothing about what the fundamental nature of reality really is.
This is really interesting, Tom. So I just want to encourage you. The way that you're talking about all these things, I think, is vastly different than the way that most atheists talk about these things. And I think that it would be good when you're introducing yourself to people to talk about these things. If you said something like, epistemically, I'm an atheist. I don't believe that there are any gods. I don't think there's any good arguments for gods. Ontologically, I'm an agnostic. I don't know whether there actually are any gods or are not any gods. I don't know. I think that a lot of philosophers, if you're going to dialogue with them, would understand that view a lot more, as we've been talking here for the last 45 minutes, to be a more accurate description of your own view.
Okay, so on the last one, you've rephrased the argument from ignorance to make it seem like not an argument from ignorance. I can do the same with anything like lightning.
How is it?
There's no difference. It's because we can't explain it, and you then assume it's not natural, or there's some fundamentally different thing just because we can't explain it with the.
How is that not assuming naturalism? You're assuming the conclusion you want. It's got to be natural, else it's an argument from ignorance.
Because everything we've discovered in the universe so far has been natural, and so we have good inductive reason that this will also be natural. Just like assuming we couldn't explain lightning 3,000 years ago. The best explanation is it's an undiscovered natural thing, not that there's a new category of reality to explain it.
So you're presupposing naturalism, and no matter what the evidence says, it has to be natural because you're presupposing naturalism.
No, I'm not presupposing anything. There is more evidence for naturalism than anything that isn't natural.
Well, you've not given any.
Science.
Science does not
All
indicate.
science.
Didn't you just say earlier that naturalists could not use the natural world to justify naturalism, and now you're saying science has justified that all that exists is natural?
No, I'm saying that we have more empirical evidence that the things that we see in the world are probably going to be explained by natural causes than a new category of thing which we have no evidence to support at all.
Okay, well, I gave evidence to support it.
Your evidence was wrong. I just proved that wrong. So do you have any other evidence?
That's the evidence. You argued from consensus with an ad populum fallacy. You confused what an appeal to ignorance is. I mean, none of these are. This is just assuming naturalism, and then when a new evidence comes about, no, that can't lead to anything other than natural, because we know naturalism is already true, because we have all this evidence for naturalism, but I'm not going to give any because we already know naturalism is true. This is just assuming naturalism.
No, that's objectively false. It's like if we have a box and we pull out a red marble, the most reasonable conclusion is the next one's going to be a red marble. If you say it's going to be a different marble that we've never seen before, that's not evidence.
Well, that's
an argument of ignorance.
That's a caricature of my arguments. I would be saying that I have actually pulled out a blue marble, and here's the evidence for it. Here's the I gave evidence in 3 arguments, and your only reply seems to be consensus.
Science works based on consensus. That's a valid argument.
No, science works on, as Emery Lakatos notes, science works on progressive and degenerate research programs. Every research program has a course, has an auxiliary hypothesis, which helps move it along. And these are things that kind of move things forward and backwards. There's multiple paradigms. As even Thomas Kuhn notes, scientific revolutions are basically quasi-religious. They don't happen instantly. These take times for things. We're seeing it right now in evolution, because a lot of scientists are starting to say the modern synthesis needs to be updated. And other scientists are saying, no, it doesn't. So there's a very interesting debate happening between Evo-Devo researchers and neo-Darwinists. I mean, this doesn't happen instantly. Research programs are progressive. I would highly recommend the book For and Against Method by Emery Lakatos and Paul Feyerabend.
Right, and I just say you're wrong. Science works based on consensus. I mean, what you're just saying is just ad hoc. It's like, no.
I mean, I'm actually appealing to philosophy of science books. I don't know what to tell you, and you're just saying I'm wrong because that's ad hoc.
No, I'm saying that science works based on consensus. We know it does.
What philosopher of science has said that?
I can definitely find you some quotes and email them to you later.
I mean, yeah, consensus is very useful, but that's not how science works. If that was how science worked, we never change anything, because the consensus would always just be like, yep, this is what we're sticking to. We would never move from geocentrism to heliocentrism. We would never have moved from thinking the entire universe was the size of our own galaxy to the vast size it is now, because consensus would have said, nope, we can't change because this guy called Albert Einstein published a paper somewhere. We can't change. That's not
as you just noted a few minutes ago. Actually, it does change.
Yeah, exactly, because it's not based on consensus. It's based on evidence. It's based on shaping principles, data.
The consensus. The evidence moves the consensus.
Yeah, and the paradigm is
because
shifting.
the people in the field understand the evidence better than we do.
Yeah, that's why I relied on a lot.
So it's probably a pretty reasonable conclusion to go with the consensus in the scientific fields, because they probably understand this.
Look, at the end of the day, you can believe whatever you want. You can have faith in whatever you want. I choose to follow evidence.
Because the first thing Shannon had said when she came in here to talk about this, she said, Tom's position is there is no God. And I said, whoa, and she jumped on my throat, because that wasn't what he was arguing.
Stop using me to justify Tom's.
I'm just saying that there was confusion. You're confused. I'm confused. Ocean's confused. I still don't know what the hell Tom's ontology is. I know what happened.
But I agree with you that I don't know what Tom's ontology is.
Thank you. I can never get a straight answer.
I've never made any claims about ontology. I've never made it because I don't know what ontology is.
That's why we don't know what your damn ontology is.
You're not telling us shit about your ontology.
Because everything I said in my opening was consistent with everything I've said in every one of my other videos. It's exactly what I would normally do, just like you would expect IP to do exactly.
So you're playing hide the ball with your ontology, and then running your simple descent like an affirmative. So you're either ignorant of this, or you're being deliberately deceptive.
Or he's saying, or there's a third option that he honestly.
Exactly.
Can I finish? You honestly, there's a third option. I do believe those are two. The third one would be you honestly think that there's exactly 50% evidence for God and 50% there is no God, and you are so right on that fence that you're not even leaning either way.
My position has nothing to do with whether or not there is a God. My position is that all of the arguments.
Are you fucking kidding me? Now that's being dishonest.
If your position has nothing to do with whether or not God exists.
Tom. Straight up dishonest.
I didn't
Come
choose
on.
the title, so you can blame.
You didn't choose the title. You agreed to the debate.
It's your debate.
I don't care.
Why did you agree to the debate if you didn't know what the damn debate
Oh,
was
that's
about?
fucked up.
That is.
You had two moderators here too.
Incompetence at this point.
I've had a couple of debates through Modern Day Debate, and both of them I changed the requested title because it didn't conform to my beliefs.
Like,
Yeah,
I
didn't even care.
The title is
going to do exactly what I do with every other one.
James is super transparent on the title.
Sure. Yeah. I think what you're doing, Tom, is hide the ball ontologically. I really do think you're.
Well, you're wrong.
I gotta tell you, Tom,
I'm doing exactly what I'm saying I'm doing.
Which is hiding the ball of your ontology.
No, I say exactly what my position
All right,
is.
So let me play a little game with you. Let me play a game. And by the way, I'm doing a debate on Modern Day's debate on the 10th, and you guys can excoriate me to no end. Now, I've already ran some of my arguments through Dave down here, that guy. I think they're pretty solid so far. But I know what I'm going myself into. I know what the topic of the debate is, and I know what I'm going to do. So Tom, let me ask you, propositions. Do you accept the propositions express some kind of expression for reality? If I ask you a true or false. So if I say God exists, is that statement true or is that statement false?
Sure. One or the other.
Do you see what he just did? I ask him if it's true or false, and he says one or the other. We know ontologically it's one or the other. They're contradictories. What kind of non-answer is that?
I'm going to continue on calling bullshit here because I've also debated IP, and in the debate with IP was super accessible. I contacted him. I asked him about the subject. I asked him what definitions that he was using. We went through what subjects that we would be debating, and we gave a basic idea of what we understood those subjects to be, and then we fucked off and studied. Like, because IP does that. He'll study forever. He plans his debates like 3 months ahead of time.
Yeah, no, he knows his shit.
And he reads up before he shows up.
Yeah, so you can tell he was prepared.
Yeah, and in the debate with me and him, he was more prepared than I was. Like, I believe that I lost that debate with him. That's one of the reasons why I respect him. And I also have like a bone to pick with him about it. But I think that I have to respect him when he shows up for a debate.
Yeah, if I lose this debate on the 10th,
the fact that Tom Jupp is saying that he didn't know the title, he didn't know definitions, he didn't understand what the fuck the IP's position was, that's just you not doing your homework, and then you're saying that you wouldn't change anything.
Yeah, that's weird.
No, I would not change a thing. All the things you're saying are not criticisms of anything I did. It's all
the
made
hell
up
they're
in your
not.
head. I represented my position exactly as I would. I represented my position. Exactly
I don't even know what your position is at this point.
Yes.
I'm so confused.
There is no evidence
You represented
God. That's my position.
You represented your you represented your position well with a few inconsistencies, but my point is that in a debate, it's not just about representing yourself; it's about debating the other.
Yeah, you have another person there. That's the whole point of a debate.
That's your approach. You can take that
No,
approach.
oh
if you
my
want.
God, come on.
It's called debate.
It's a modern day debate channel. You're having a debate. You're not having a soliloquy. Oh my
Great.
God.
That's why we
Really?
start with our positions and then we discuss them. That's the way we do it.
I couldn't tell somebody your positions in my life depended on it.
I mean, I've only been in 5 debates, so I mean, I'm not an expert, but shit.
Hey, Tom, I'm starting to understand why Ocean and Steve have a problem, because over the last few minutes, you've actually kind of sounded like something Steve has railed against. You sound like the atheist who confronts all theistic arguments with, well, you're just wrong.
That's what he did. He did that in the debate.
And I don't have to justify what I believe. I mean, that's what it kind of sounded like over the last few minutes.
Red, you got your hands raised,
my
by the way.
position, my position is that I can demonstrate they're all
sorry.
wrong.
We're on a different topic.
All right.
Hey, hang on, let him talk.
Go ahead.
I'm talking.
My position is that I can demonstrate they're all wrong. It's not just asserting that they're wrong.
And then I wonder why you didn't address his position.
I did. Those are all
His
addressed by
premise
the
is-
academic
is-
consensus. The
his
fact that he
position-
takes
No, that doesn't work that way.
You didn't address
Wow.
it. Other people have addressed it, but that's not that they weren't debating.
Yeah, you can't just say, hey, look, they did all the work. Go read something. That's not how you do debate.
Tom said a lot of stuff, but I'm not sure I got an answer to the question. What is the proper epistemology of religion? My answer is very, very simple.